What we've got here is failure to communicate. Some men you just can't reach.
Welcome to Werewolf, the podcast. This is episode 18. I'm currently fighting for the British Army. Well, doing shit for the British Army. Hope you're enjoying the series so far. Please go back and listen to the other episodes. If you would like to give me some money for being so great, there is a link support in the description. So you could go and buy me a coffee, they say, and that would be wonderful. Mine's a flat white. Thank you very much. That's great. Carrying on. Episode 18. Blood Eagle Bonus. I dragged the officer through the forest by his left foot, his head and body banging and bruising on the branches and boulders as we bimbled between the fallen boughs. He had faced me down and showed me no fear. No one does that crazy shit, so I wanted to treat him like the great warrior he was. I truly admired this man. He was strong and brave and all the things that a fighter should be. I was going to show him the most tremendous respect. I took him into the clearing that was my home at this moment in time. I was here on an awful job as usual. Usually these jobs were easy and straightforward, but this particular guy had been a real pain in the arse. I had to tease him out of his hole like a fucking blood-sucking tick. He had the guts and the ability to set a trap for me. Already scared her. Already scary her. He'd done his due diligence and somehow knew that I was in the area and what I would do. When I saw the chief after this job, I would be complaining heaps. Obviously, we had some intelligence leaks, or a lack of intelligence in the general. I don't know, army intelligence really is an oxymoron at times. I'd been shepherded into a situation from which I was lucky to get out of alive. They had drawn me into an abandoned part of town, and whoever had planned this had been fucking clever. They knew that if they'd laid mines or IEDs or traps or had soldiers waiting there, then I would have noticed them using my super spidey senses, and I would have changed plans. I did not feel suspicious about the situation I was walking into. I felt like I was going into an area that had been ripped apart and that would be in very little danger. Little did I know the wolf trap had been set. My job tonight was really to go in and clear out any stragglers left after the assault that killed the town's inhabitants. There could be no combatants left alive, and there could be no witnesses of the atrocities undertaken, so it didn't matter if they happened to be the general population, the rebels, women, children, cats, or anything that breathed. I had a scorched earth policy, a dead everything policy. You get me? Everything had to be dead. The attacking soldiers had killed mercilessly on their recent attack. They'd done an outstanding job of murder and killing in general. However, in these cases, the standard thing to do was to send a unit back into the field after the initial onslaught. This is always after the initial cleansing. The job would be to clear up those that had hidden or been missed for some reason during the first massacre. It's a massacre. I would wander back into the village and find them as they were getting themselves together to make an escape, and then murder them. Or I would use my wolfy faculties to track them down to their hiding places, and then murder them. There were many benefits to using me. I would be on my own, dressed in a NATO peacekeeper's uniform, driving a nice blue Land Rover Defender. The people would rush out to the car and crowd around it. I would open the back to offer the food and the water that was back there. They thought I was the rescuer of the first wave, the nice people. I would get them to gather all the survivors, to bring them to the vehicle, to get help and support. I waited there for them. The young came, the old, the everyone. Once I'd seemed to gather a large enough group, and when I could not be bothered waiting anymore, I imbibed my posit and we did that thing that I said, the murdering. Sadly, when people saw me, they would think I was there to save and help them. It was funny how people rushed out to meet me, their hearts all full of joy at the sight of the man in the peacekeeping blue uniform, only to be torn to pieces in the next moment. As I searched the town, actively finding and dispatching the remnants of the population, I didn't realise how the damage done to the buildings around me had forced me into a specific direction. I really should have noticed, but as usual, I was totally overconfident. The roadways had been so badly damaged that I had to abandon my vehicle. I wandered down a bomb and shell-damaged number of streets to go to the centre of the town or the village or whatever it had been. I'd also been told that there was nothing left on the site that could do me significant harm. That intelligent intelligence are fucking totally liars. They often dumped me in bad situations on purpose, I thought, to see if I could get out of it in one piece. I had to finish the job quickly before the real peacekeepers did turn up. I had to be moving fast, so I'd always take the path of least resistance to get where I needed to be. I had not realised that this would be exactly what the commander of the opposing forces had planned. Clever bastard. In a short time and a few deaths, I'd reached a small square that at one time must have been a delightful bijou example of the classic architecture of this particular region, and now it looked like a bomb site that had been heavily bombed by big fuck-off bombs. I'd been brought to this site by the sense that there were still people hiding out in one of the not-so-damaged buildings, and it would be my job to make them not-so-people and much more so-corpses. I entered the square in my human form, a naked, shell-shocked man, and made my way towards the respective building. As I walked, the world became only dust and debris. Bits of sharp metal flying everywhere around me. Large caliber munitions were being used to shell the square. I was thrown around like a shitty ragdoll, being ripped and torn apart by hot iron and by many explosions. I could feel only the pain and the movement as I was shredded by shrapnel, and my hearing was gone to the explosive blasts. I stumbled as a leg shattered and fell. I absorbed my posit and sat through the next few moments in a non-Disney, dizzying whirlwind of brutalization. It was like being in a washing machine with several house bricks, I imagine. The wash cycle including exploding shrapnel which scythed through my flesh. I expected to see no more at any moment. My end was realised. Then my expectation was actually real. Then there was no more. I woke into a discombobulating hell. My brain was spinning and it took a while for it to settle down. The pressure waves and the vibrations of explosions had gone and the dust was settling all around me. Somehow, by a happy stroke of luck, I had fallen behind some semi-destroyed vehicles which had taken much of the abuse. All I could do was try to get my wits back, and I lay still as though dead and wished that I fucking was after a while. Now prone and on my chest, I woke to a clanging world. My ears rang in defiance of their treatment. My vision was gone from my left eye, which was severely damaged. I was seriously messed up at this stage, but it would all heal given enough time. My vision in my right eye was already getting better. The focus and the colour came back into resonance in my brain. I felt the flesh and the bone in my body start to re-knit and rebuild. Wolfie will be back. And oh, how that wolf would make them pay. It actually did not matter who'd done this thing. I would take it out on the next whoever I would meet. Confusingly, the ground was still shaking. Slowly as I lifted my head, I saw the blurry outlines of heavy tracked vehicles start to enter the square. The tank was screening infantry as they made their way to where I lay. I knew I needed time to recover. My body would quickly heal if I gave it time. I would be ready to fight again in a matter of minutes, but I wasn't ready yet. In the lead tank was the commanding officer. He was a shrewd tactician, but he was not so clever that he didn't make it obvious who he was with a bit of over-ostentation of his uniform. As the tank got closer to me, I realised that my only option at this point was to stay fucking still. Play possum, as they say. And then I would get myself back together so that I could act when the time was right. He must have thought that I was dead as he drove to within a few metres of my position. As the tank's tracks settled down and the engine sputtered and died, he jovially ordered 4 men forward to check my shattered body. That was silly. They should have been shooting and throwing grenades to rip apart my downed corpse. They must have known nothing about how quickly I could regenerate back to health, and that in 4 or 5 minutes that they took to get to me, I would almost be fully healed and thoroughly fucked off to boot. They took their time getting closer, their rifles trained on me. The fear was blooming and booming in their little minds and hearts. I waited as they got closer and closer. This was a difficult balance to make. I had no way of knowing if my body would allow me to move when needed. I couldn't test it, I could just feel it repair. They continued forward slowly, each of them trying to be the last man to get there and not be the first. The longer it took, the better for me, and I was smiling and waiting, ready to go. Then one of the soldiers stepped into the puddle of my own blood that I lay in, and I moved. I smashed into the first two men, knowing they would not rise ever again with the two blows that I landed. Backs and heads had shattered and splattered with my impact. I got to the next two soldiers before the two dead had hit the floor and before the new foes had a chance to even raise a weapon. Speed was my friend. I kicked one at the tank with a sickening crunch, grabbed the second man's gun and bit into his head. I kept my momentum constantly going forward in a straight line, always on towards the war machine and its master. Shots started to rattle around me and I felt one or two hits, but I had a single target in mind, the commander in the tank. As I ran at him, he realised that it was him I was coming for, and he started to drop into the turret of the tank and reach for the outside hatch to seal it. Unluckily for him, I got there first and, wrenching the hatch from the tank top, snatched him out of the bolt hole and tucked him under one arm and shot away for cover. It must have taken seconds and left the remaining soldiers in shock, panic, disbelief, and happily for me to get further away as I ran. The court commander was screaming as I ran, saying things in some language that I couldn't understand. I think he must have been telling his men not to shoot at me. Even at this point, he was very aware of what was happening. He soon would not be. His men did not listen, so they fired all their weapons at the fleeing wolf, and I kept fucking running. I was now on the outskirts of the village and into the surrounding woodland. I had a prize, and after I'd finished playing with it, I would return to that village and kill all of the soldiers and every other person in the dark of the night. I knew that without their leader, the rest of the band would fall to a rat's mess, and they would be easy to clear like vermin from the crappy little hole of a town. I got myself and him to the small clearing where I'd stashed my gear, and I sat the man down with his back to a tree while I looked at him. He sat there cowering as I loomed over him, enjoying the early evening. The silence that had descended slowly became full of the noises of nature as wind moved the trees, and in the distance I heard a dog-fox bark. The man half lay against the stump of a broken tree, and he was ashen white. He still maintained a look of righteous indignation on his face, even though I could see his massive discomfort. This guy was fighting through the fear and showing real resilience in the face of this moment. I have to admit a little bit of respect for him and disappointment at feeling that respect. He placed his hand on the ground and made as if he was going to get up. I held his chest against the tree as he tried to move and pushed him back down into a sitting position. I had not been paying enough attention to my work though, as he'd snatched a blade from his belt and stuck it full force through the thin pelt at my wrist and into my arm. He was quick, sticking it deep in me before even Super Me had time to react. His eyes lit up with this little moment of bravado, and he yelled in triumph. Now laughing and speaking in broken English, he celebrated loudly, "Hey, I got you! I got you!" I stood and stared at him. I had not even flinched as he struggled to try and remove the knife from my flesh for the next attack. His hand slipped from the grip. I slowly turned my head towards him and pulled his hand and returned it to the hilt of the knife with my free paw. I motioned for him to grab it. He looked on in astonishment as I did this. His fingers encircled the handle of the blade. He must have thought that he was going to get to do more damage. A look of confusion and then glee came to his face, replaced by the pain that racked his body. I had enveloped his hand on the knife in my own and crushed it around the handle. He stifled a scream and held himself with nobility. I removed the blade from my arm and cast it to one side, then gave him a big toothy smile, as only a werewolf truly can. I put a single finger to my snout and gave him a wolfish shush, and I transformed right there in front of him back to the man, no less dangerous than the other forms I could take. That was an excellent plan you had back there in the town. You almost got me with the artillery. I'm so impressed. The listening man smiled with pride. He took the compliment as though he deserved it. This was an egotistical, narcissistic, psychotic bastard. Just like myself. I really liked him. He started speaking something Slavic, and I shook my head and moved my grip up to his chin. English, please. I have read the reports on you. They think that you are completely fluent. Maybe next time I kill you. He smiled and looked away from my eyes. I laughed in response. He was cool. No, next time, I'm afraid. I'm a professional and this is a job. You were an unexpected bonus on this operation. I was supposed to be killing you. Haven't got my diary. Next Wednesday, I think, I said. He laughed and nodded. Ah, well, I tried. You really would be foolish to let me live. I nodded in agreement. This was like working with a proper professional. He understood his situation and seemed happy with it. We held the eyes of each other for a little too long. Respect was there, not fear. This man was a warrior, and as a warrior I wanted to make his ending worthy. I told him of the Vikings and how they committed the blood eagle on the bravest of the warriors that they captured as an offer to the gods. If a warrior went through the horrific process without crying out, then he would get a seat next to Odin himself in Valhalla. What a crock of crap. But he went with it. He was silent, showing no fear. He was fucking awesome. He watched me now prepare. I put 4 stakes in the ground, 1 for each limb, and tied him down on his front spread-eagled, his back directly to the canopy of trees and to the stars that were just out and twinkly. When he was secure, I tore the clothing free from his upper body and squatted down to see what it was I just had to work with. He was muscular and just turning to fat, probably not a lot of time to exercise on a war front. After a few moments of due consideration and cogitation, I went and got his blade. It was of fantastic quality, and he'd spent a lot of time on its upkeep and maintenance. The thing was scalpel sharp. It looked so sharp that it felt alive. This would be a bonus for him. The sharper the blade, the less time and probably the less pain. Carefully, I used the tip of the knife to cut the skin on his back. The bloody slit I created formed the outline of an eagle. I did it quickly and with a practiced eye. It would have been much more painful with a dull blade. He did not squirm or move, although he broke out into a sweat that covered his skin very quickly. I used the tip of the blade like a pencil and a bit of his shirt to wipe the blood away as I cut. Not really a time for hygiene, but I needed to see my outline as I worked, a bit like a tattooist, I suppose. The head of the bird was just at the nape of his neck. The body of the eagle ran down the spine. The wings spread across his broad back onto each of his lats. I took my time and I did a pretty good job until the talons above his butt. They were a bit messy, be honest. Throughout this, he shook and shivered, but not once let a sound pass his lips. Not once did he pass out from the pain. He was incredible. Once I'd drawn the eagle, I sat back and took a picture of it for posterity and to show the chief what I'd captured. Then I went back to him to continue. I started with the left wingtip and started to take the skin from the fascia of the muscles, skinning him very proficiently. Beautiful weather we're having here lately, sir, I said, amusing myself and my posit by pretending to be a hairdresser. Fenrir always appreciated my sense of humour. Got any holiday plans this summer? I asked him and paused as if waiting for a reply. Well, you may be able to fly there if this operation is a success, Fenrir added. The knife was beautiful, gently lifting the skin and revealing the exposed muscle below. Honestly, once I'd removed it all, I realised I'd, only seen a few things more beautiful in my life. I stopped for another photo opportunity and a drink of water. I was so impressed with the guy that I even wasted some of the water on him, letting him take a sip from the bottle I held at his mouth. How does that feel? I asked. I wanted a genuine answer. I wasn't mocking him, I just wanted to know. Not good, he replied in a heavy accent. I nodded and pushed my shirt beneath his head so he could rest a little more comfortably. I was nice like that, only torture when you need to, but, do it decently. I then sliced deep into the muscle of the back, removing the flesh in chunks so that it would create the silhouette of the bird down to the bones. The muscle was tense as I cut with each slice, but it relaxed when it was no longer linked to the body. Each time a chunk was removed, he had a little death. An orgasm in French is defined as a little death. So he had many that night. Several times he passed out, but he wasn't dead. Each time I would stop until I could sense he was back with me. When done, I poured a good whiskey onto the wounds to make the blood vessels constrict. Still, he'd made no sound. What a guy. What self-control. Gosh, he was tough. He looked beautifully horrific, but he was the perfect man. Now came the tricky bit. I would have to shear through the ribs and open them up to the evening air. If done correctly, it would look like the wings of an eagle opening. This was really tough to do though. Even with this blade, living bone is tough to get through without hacking at it. So I have to admit that the resulting eagle looked a bit untidy, but it was still there. The rib cage was open to the night sky like the somewhat ragged wings of a brutalized bird of prey. The crunches and the cracks of the breaking bones when being cut were so thrilling. Again, I took a photo to send to the chief. The man at this point was unconscious and not waking. I tried to rouse him from his state, but he was oblivious now. I would finish the job to give him the respect he deserved, even if he could no longer enjoy it. I pierced and cut out the pleural membrane that surrounded the lungs. The last part would have to be quick because the lungs would not inflate or deflate. He would soon die from blood loss or from suffocation. So finally, and a bit rushed, I scooped out the left and right lungs, lying them in opposition from the spine. It was beautiful. I so wanted the guy to be alive to see the photo of his own back. He would have been so proud of what he'd done, but sadly, he never woke and passed within the next few moments. Do you know what? I hope he got his seat next to Odin. He deserved it. After sitting and appreciating this beautiful artwork for some time, I got myself together, wiping the tears from my eyes, and changed back to my werewolfy state. I then went back to the village and fucking killed and murdered every cunt that was there. Thanks for listening. Love you loads. Bye.